Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Andres. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, if you're here, you are wanting to learn all about the art of listening. And so if your sales calls haven't been going very well, or maybe you've never had any sales calls, and maybe even in your conversations with other people on every day, your listening skills can make or break the entire conversation. It will change how other people feel when they're around you. Now, the question is why are we focusing so much attention on listening? It's because I think most of us in everyday conversation are using our listening skills just to respond, right? We're only listening to respond. We're not actually listening to understand the other person. And so, in general, I'm going to define listening for us today, and then we'll do some role plays. So, hopefully, some of the people here, you'll want to come up with us and do a little bit of our role plays, but it will be different. You won't be so pressured. It won't be as hard as they've been in the past. Okay, so today our role plays are only going to focus on listening and how well you listen. So the way I define listening, and Chris, please tell me if your idea of listening is different at all. For me, listening goes beyond hearing the words someone says. It's the ability to understand the full meaning of what the person is communicating, even if they don't say everything or if they use the wrong words. Okay, so really one of the keys here is if you are listening, if you don't understand what they mean, then that's the opportunity to ask a question. Today, we're not going to go into questions. That'll be for one of the later calls, but we will be going into, do you understand what they mean? Okay, not just the words coming out of their mouth, but the whole picture. And so the goal of listening is to make the other person feel heard. When they feel heard, they feel understood. Now trust begins. They start to feel a relationship with you, or maybe even a friendship with you. I've had so many people tell me that they're my best friend that I never knew about just because of what I was saying that they really related to. Okay. When someone moves along that spectrum of the relationship, they start to feel a relationship with you, that's when they'll want to take your advice, especially around hearing your recommendation on the best course of action. They'll want to learn from you, and then eventually they will want to work with you. So that's why we're here today. Chris, what are your
That
thoughts?
sounds great. That sounds great, Jewel. And I think there are levels to listening. I would just start with level one, everybody, which is, are you giving that person your undivided attention and paying attention to just the words? I think if you could just listen to the words, that's just level one. That would be fantastic. And that's a vast improvement to what everybody else is doing right now. I find it interesting that a lot of times when we do the role plays, or if I was able to eavesdrop on anybody's sales conversations, it feels like two people are talking, not exactly at the same time, but no one's listening. And so what's happening, I envision this in my head. Jules talking, and I'm here, and my mouth is not moving, but I'm just thinking about what I want to say as soon as Jewel goes quiet. And so my ability just to even process the words that she said is diminished because my brain is multitasking right now. So maybe picking up a few things. And at worst, what's happening is I have a lens, a frame in which I presume Jewel to be saying something. So whatever word she's using gets mutated through my filter. And so then I hear different things. In sales, we call this happy ears. And happy ears is kind of what it sounds like you hear what you want to hear. So Jewel may be explicitly and implicitly saying, I'm not comfortable, I don't feel safe, I'm not moving forward, this price is too much. But what you're hearing is, I love you, your work is amazing, I'm ready to sign the dotted line, and there's no amount of money that I wouldn't pay to receive your services. And we can usually tell because when you respond, the other person usually has a reaction. And if you're paying careful attention, you'll see the reaction in a weird pause, in a change in body language, in a raised eyebrow or furrowed eyebrows. Something is off and you're still not listening. So now we're talking about listening without even using words, like listening, looking at the visual nonverbal cues. So I would say the base level is just pay attention to the other person's words. I think what Jules talking about is layers 2 and 3, paying attention to tone. And she's pretty good at picking these up. Like when I'm like, yeah, she's like, there's a lot of different yeahs, But the way she says it, I can't tell the difference between each yeah, but there's definitely a lot of different yes. Like there's yeah, there's yeah, the strained pregnant yeah, and there's yes, like with a question mark at the back end of it. So we know that from different studies and kind of made famous through Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. So there are three yeses, and only one of them is true. One is yes, I hear what you're saying. The other yes is yes, I don't want to hear you speak anymore, so I'm going to just say yes so you could shut up. The one yes that we're looking for is yes, I'm ready to move forward. We're in complete agreement and alignment. Okay? So there's the words, there's the tone in which the words are being said and how it's being enunciated or pronounced. That's very important for you to pay attention to. I would consider layer three what isn't even said at all, understanding the subtext, what's happening between the words. And we know this in movies, we know this in reading novels. When there's a dialogue scene between two people, we can read the emotion, like maybe one character saying, if you walk out that door, I will not be home when you come back. But she's saying, you're free to go wherever you want. We as the audience know this, but the other person who's about to walk out that door doesn't understand the subtext at all. And that's what's caused some of us, not me, in the theater stand up like, don't walk out the door. He or she will not be here when you come back. And it makes us all kind of, our guts kind of churn and just tie up into knots because we know what is being said and what is meant. And they're two different things. So for me, there's at least three layers here. Jule, do you see it any other way?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. I just published my PDF, which I forgot to publish earlier. I did create a listening scorecard. So if you look in the chat, everybody, and you click on that link, it's 5 layers of listening, and they're not rated from, easiest to hardest, but there are definitely 3 of what you just said overlap with some of the categories. Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted with messages.
Mm-hmm.
So really quick, I will run through them. Sorry, I've lost my own link. Okay. So Chris has already covered some of the basic layers. So if you go to slide 6, the words coming out of their mouth, do you at least have the facts correct? Did you understand and capture the basic information correctly? So this is the bare minimum. And so many people get this wrong because they're not fully present. They're not focused and they're not actually hearing the words. And like Chris said earlier, happy ears. So sometimes I've literally seen this even with coaches. Like our job, I would say like 75% of our job is to just listen. And yet I see coaches get this wrong because they're so quick to spin up stories. They're projecting their own experiences onto the client and they're not actually hearing the words coming out of the other person's mouth. So this is the bare minimum level right here. Okay. If you go to slide 7, it's understanding the unspoken. So reading between the lines, AKA the subtext. Identify the emotion if you can. So are you able to pick up on what they're not quite saying? What emotions are they displaying? And then ask yourself, what's the full picture here? This is definitely a little bit more advanced. If you go to the next slide, there are the physical cues. Physical cues such as the tone, the shift in energy, watch their facial expressions or their body language. So if you're on the webinar with us, you actually have a huge advantage today that you never had, because when you were listening to us on LinkedIn audio, you only had our voice to listen to, which is still plenty of information. And in our coaching, one of the coaching programs, I've been to multiple, but one of the coaching programs, I was taught by this master coach who has been coaching for over 25 years. She was taught by one of the very first prominent coaches ever, like the guy who is considered to have started the entire coaching industry. And their old school philosophy is that if you're really a good listener, if you want to train yourself to be a good listener, you don't even need video. You would only listen. So don't sit here thinking you need to have video because there's still lots of information coming through on just the voice. So pay attention to how they're saying something, or what they look like. Now, the kicker is, does it match or does it conflict with what they're saying? If you're familiar with this study, the Morabian rule, I think that's how you say it. I think we've seen the numbers, something like seven. Chris, do you know the percentage breakdown?
I should know this, but I don't know it off the top of my head. I'll look it up.
Yeah, so you've seen this all over social media, I'm sure, where they say a small percent are paid attention to the words, and then more attention paid to how you're saying it, right?
Yes,
Like your voice. Do you have the percentage
I
breakdown?
do. I do. It's 738.55. So I think it's 7% of what is said, the actual words communicate what you're saying. And then 38% takes place through tone and voice. And the remaining 55% are factors that take place through body language, facial expressions, etc.
Okay. Now, this may be weird that I'm bringing this up because those percentages are actually wrong. So the guy who actually did the study said this was never the conclusion of his study, but it's one of those things that's caught on like wildfire in the mainstream. People will quote this all over the place, and the percentages are not correct, but I want you to take away the overall message, right? There's the words, there's how they're saying it, and then there's the other stuff like the body language. You want to take all of that into account. And then lastly, the client's context. So this specifically is a very coach-oriented dimension here, as in who is that client? So maybe about a month ago, we had somebody who did a role play with you, Chris, the photographer who was pitching you her headshot photography services. She did not look up any information about you. She didn't know who you were. And so everyone in the webinar today, I'm assuming you know who Chris is. Like you joined this from his LinkedIn Live. You have some idea who Chris is. You know he's an influencer. You know his history with design and branding, having an agency, all of this. Maybe not the details, but you have an idea that he's pretty up there, right? He's got a video team. So if you look at that client context, who are they? What kind of experiences have they had? What's their values and belief system? So if you consider what they're sharing in the context of who they are, what does that tell you in terms of what you're hearing, in terms of your listening? So that photographer who was pitching you her services, she was talking to you like you had no idea about the photography world, like you had no idea on these kind of services. And that was where I was cringing a little bit because I was like, dude, like, why are you talking to Chris like he's a total noob? Like he has so much knowledge, and in fact, he has even more knowledge than she herself did. So take these things into consideration. Something so simple can be a quick turn off to someone. Okay. So do you have anything else you wanted to add?
What's real interesting to me, Jewel, is I hadn't seen your PDF slides, and here I am saying very similar things using the similar language. And I just wanted to reassure people a couple different things. I think in this day and age where Zoom has become so ubiquitous, it can be pretty easy for us to kind of get lost in the sauce here. But I do want to tell you, for the vast majority of my professional career as a motion designer, director, and a production company, almost all of the new business calls happen with voice only. Good old fashioned speakerphone on a Polycom triangular spaceship looking phone. And I cut my teeth on doing sales calls and winning tens of millions of dollars of business just by listening. In fact, some of the calls I closed while driving in my Mini Cooper via the speakerphone in the car. And so you can get really good at this. And I've been able to close $600,000-$700,000 jobs walking in a factory with the echoey sound, non-ideal conditions, because I've learned to listen not just to the words, but the tone and how it's said. Right? So for example, here's the classic example. I'll just use my own children here. I'll say to Matthias, my youngest, hey, are you gonna take out the trash? Yeah. I'm like, the gap between me asking and him responding says a lot to me. Like he's thinking about something, and the way he said, yeah, like, is he annoyed by it that I'm asking him to do a basic responsibility at home? And just that simple thing, space and tone tells me a lot. So when you ask a client, how does $55,000 sound for this engagement? Yeah, Like, there's a lot of ways for us to try to figure out what this is. Happy Ears is, yes, they're ready to sign the dotted line. I'll send you a 38-page proposal. It'll take me 2 days to do. And then they ghost on you for like weeks. And you're like, Chris, I don't understand. Clients keep ghosting on me because you weren't paying attention. So if you're never sure what someone's saying, just ask. Just say, like, I notice a pause. Quite literally, my observation is there was a pause. I don't know what that means, so I'm just going to ask you. I just noticed a pause before you said, yeah. Tell me was there any kind of meaning behind that? And they'll tell you. And you want to ask in the most neutral language that you can versus saying, I see you're not comfortable with moving forward. There's too much interpretation there, I think. Jewel, I see your face kind of changing here. Maybe you have a different point of view.
Oh, no, no. Like, I'm totally agreeing. Like, I'm I'm pre-cringing at anticipating someone saying that to me because they have in the
Yep.
past. And what's happening there is not just interpretation, but you're labeling the other person, and that's what people don't like. So this is all really part and parcel of active listening, but we've split this up today. So we have the call today and we also have the call Sunday, right? Very close together because there's a listening component, like literally the information you're taking in, but then there's a response component. What do you do with that and how do you respond in a way that's appropriate? And so one of the biggest problems in what you just said, I see you're uncomfortable, is like, am I? How do you know I'm uncomfortable? So you have to be careful of when you place descriptors or labels on other people. It's risky. So the problem here is when you get it right, that person feels very heard. They're like, oh, they get me. But when you get it wrong, you're increasing the distance between you two. Right? It's off-putting to be placed into a box. I've heard so many creatives who are like, don't put me in a box. So just keep that in mind. And then that also reminds me of my last dimension on the scorecard. But before I move on to that, Chris, um, what do you think causes some of the issues that we're seeing with people with the happy ears or just anything that gets in the way of listening?
I have talked to enough creative people, Jewel, that I think I can pretty safely give you a broad answer to this that I think will ring true for a lot of people. Maybe not for everyone. I think number one is we don't get enough new leads. We just don't. And that's generally the problem. So if you have more leads, an abundance of leads that you don't even know how to schedule the calls, it's going to change the way you take the call and your mindset and how you frame it. But the problem is if we get one new lead a month, that's not enough for us to get any kind of real traction. And then we feel like so pressured to close this. And that's coupled with the mindset, a scarcity mindset, where if we don't close this job, we'll never see another opportunity. And so all that is conspiring against us to actually be fully present in the moment on the call, to be of service to the other person, to act with integrity, and to also see what we do as valuable. And those are some challenges that people have. You're so desperate, you're going to pre-negotiate against yourself. You're going to ask for the sale long before, or just way too soon, before the client even knows that there's rapport or trust being built, or you have an understanding of them and the problem. I think all those things, plus the lack of training, one of the biggest things that people blame when a relationship falls apart, whether in a romantic sense or a business sense, is we're just not communicating. We're not seeing eye to eye. And that's really what that means. We don't know how to listen. So we haven't been trained to do this. Oops, you're muted, I think. Oh, there
Yeah,
you go. Yeah.
I agree. There's a lot. So I have my little list of stuff that I've observed from my encounters one-on-one coaching with creatives, and definitely being desperate for the sale. They enter the conversation with the intent to convince. There's a convincing energy. I have to prove myself instead of just listening. And so when I think of myself in any conversation with people, but especially in the context of sales or coaching, I sort of picture myself as this empty pool. And the other person is dropping things into the pool. And my job is to just gather them and just see. Just keep gathering them and see what kind of picture it makes. And when your pool is cloudy, because you've got other stuff going on, it makes it a lot harder to see that person's picture. Okay. So part of that is entering with desperation. You place pressure on yourself. You come into this saying, I better not F this up. I haven't had a sale in 6 months. I have to land this. When you place pressure upon yourself, you're already probably not going to be able to listen. You may be listening with 10% of your capacity. The other big issue I see is the need to prove your self-worth. So how smart you are, that's always been my traditional hang up there. How good your work is, and that your prices are worth it. And that's because in the creative space especially is you equate your work with yourself. So your prices of your work, you think your prices are about yourself. You're trying to justify your self-worth to the other person. And again, it comes off with this very off-putting energy in the conversation. You're not listening. And then you're listening to respond, as in to win. You're trying to win the conversation for some strange reason instead of trying to win the client, which is a totally different energy. But some of the other stuff I see that sort of cloud the pool here is one, you're literally not listening. And a very clear indicator of this is if you're not recording your sales calls, you should record your sales calls and then upload them into some sort of transcription service like Otter AI. Chris, in your conversations, what percent of the time do you think you're generally speaking?
It depends, Jewel. It depends if it's a sales conversation. I aspire to say as little as possible. And then every word that I say carries a lot more meaning. And I've realized that the clients have all the knowledge about the problems, the solutions, their hangups, and who they want to work with. And by asking smart, calibrated questions, I gain an unfair competitive advantage over the other people they're considering. And that's what I want. And I also, I get this feeling, sometimes it's just a feeling, and sometimes they literally say this to me. And this is what I strive for at the end of the conversation. They say, you've asked me more thought-provoking questions than anyone has ever asked me. You helped me to achieve a level of clarity that I haven't been able to get to in weeks. Forget about like the half an hour we spent together. They'll say things like, this was really uncomfortable for me to do, but it was worth it. And thank you for doing this. They thank you for agreeing for them to give you money, which is, I love that part. Like, thank you for giving me the opportunity to give you my money because I just feel that you just get me. And even when I'm not qualified for work, the clients just say, you know what? I don't know who else I would give this to because who's going to understand me the way you do?
I've heard those phrases too. I remember once there was a guy who hired me late last year. And the thing that I like to do is I'll often say, like, if somebody is a little bit on the fence or I can see they're a little hesitant, maybe they're coming at this with one of those, let's say they like to consider their options. I'll say, go consider your options. But with this one guy, I'll never forget what he said to me. I said, yeah, go ahead, check out other coaches if you have to. You got to do what's right for you. And he said, oh no, where else am I going to find a life coach who is familiar with the gaming industry and even familiar with the product that I work at, like the company, their gaming product? And I was like, wow, that's insane. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff you said about people having or feeling uncomfortable with the questions, thought-provoking questions, like all of this sums up to when you are listening and you're listening well, you will naturally come up with questions that will help them learn about themselves. And that's the gift that keeps giving. Okay. People will never forget that feeling when you help them realize something about themselves. So, percentage of the time, if you're in a sales call, I'm guessing you're talking maybe 30%-ish. Would that be fair?
I think that would be fair. My goal is to do 15%. The only times when I feel really compelled to speak is towards the end when I'd like to summarize or provide insights. Unless the clients are asking me lots of questions, but even when they ask me a question, I just want to turn around and ask them more questions.
Okay. How do you do that without coming off evasive?
Can you give me an example of when you think somebody's asking a question and it feels evasive to you?
Well, only if I've asked them a question first and then they turn it back on me. Sometimes I've seen some of our role players do this where you ask them the price and then they turn around and ask you something about price instead of just answering the question.
Okay. Did you feel like the question I asked you was evasive?
No.
See, I
I
just asked you two questions. You see what I just did there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Jewel and I have seen this before. It's like monkey see, monkey do, but monkey do all wrong. Okay. So you're like, oh, Chris has asked a lot of questions. And they're like, what is your favorite color? What do you think my favorite color is? And it's like, no, that's the wrong way to do it. That's when I was like, can I get a straight answer from you or not? There are times when you'll need to answer a question, but a lot of times what I'm trying to do is I want to give you the right answer. I just don't understand the question well enough. I don't want to rush to giving you an answer, and that's where I'm coming from. It's the intentionality behind it versus I'm trying to avoid something because I don't know the answer. Now, there will be times when somebody will ask you a question where you don't know the answer. There's no way you could know the answer, or your brain just locked up. I just say, you know what? That's a really good question. I owe you a better answer than the one I can give you just off the top of my head. I need a minute to think about this, or and if I can't figure it out, may I have your permission to DM you or email you later what I think the answer is supposed to be? Or sometimes I just have some fun with it. I say, oh, that question or that answer is above my pay grade. I need to contact the technical team, and I know they'll know the answer. And you actually gain a lot of trust points when you admit what you don't know. And I'll tell you why. This is the paradox of knowledge or not knowing, okay? When you tell someone something that you don't know, you just made up, and they know it, then they wonder to themselves, what else have you been telling me that you're just making up a lot of BS for? Conversely, if you say, I don't have a good answer for this, they're like, he's been dishonest about little things, he's probably honest about everything else. And this is, by the way, how con artists get you to believe things. They tell you some truth so that you believe all the lies, or they'll admit to a lie so that you believe everything else is the truth. So when someone asks you a question, you don't know the answer, just say, I just don't know. That's a great question. I've never been asked that before. Let me think on that. And that's what you need to do. We'll see it. We'll see it when we advance in the other parts of our calls where we're actually getting to live role play with each other. And then you'll see like, oh my gosh, I'm doing that thing that Chris and Jewel warned me about doing. I want to touch on one thing. I almost forgot to talk about this, Jewel. You had said the photographer should have known who I was, should have figured this out before the sales call. I'm gonna help all of you because that could be very stressful. Even if you knew nothing about me, you know something about what you do. So when the photographer asked me, who are some photographers that you look up to? And without hesitation, I was able to say Albert Watson, a photographer she didn't know, which is really weird. So that's a clue. Like I'm not some guy who fell off the photography truck and doesn't know anything about photography. So if you were really listening, that would have been a ginormous clue to say, like, wait, I cannot treat Chris like the way I treat everyone else. I can't tell him, here's how it works, because that's what people do all the time. You see, so she wasn't even listening. Jewel?
Well, not only that, but you literally came out and said, I'm in the industry. Like you said that phrase. So she just kind of brushed right over it. And then when we took a sidebar, I said, hey, Chris said this very specifically. What do you think he was trying to tell you? And she was like, I don't know. So, so, it's like no shade to her, right? But it's
Right, no
like
shade.
when you have a conversation, I think this is what we're all doing.
Yeah.
Our brains will take in certain pieces of information. When we don't know what to do with something, we just throw it out, like as if we never heard it. But I want you to go into these conversations thinking when you're in a sales conversation or a coaching conversation, there's nothing that the person is saying that is random. There's a reason they are saying it to you. So just because you don't know what that means or what you're supposed to take away from that does not mean you should just dismiss it and ignore it like it never was said. If you don't know, then just ask.
Yeah,
Now, I
so I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, if you don't know what I'm in the industry means, she just asked, I'm just curious, like, what do you mean when you say you're in the industry? What industry are you in? Then she would know.
Yeah, exactly. And what I was gonna say is I know, like the first thing that I was thinking when you said, if you don't know, just ask, like earlier, and even now, the number one thing I think that keeps people from doing this is their ego, their pride. They're afraid of looking bad or incompetent in front of the potential client. But I tell you what's worse is if you just keep glossing over things and, let's say the destination is Costco and you end up at J.C. Penney, that's going to look a lot worse. So your conversation, the goal is to end up at the same place as where that person wants you to be. The more you veer off, the fewer questions you ask, the more you ignore things, you just reject things straight out of your mind, the more likely it is you're going to end up at a totally different place. And then guess what? You get ghosted.
Yeah, so the best time to raise the question about something you don't know is the first time. Because what happens is they keep talking and you're getting deeper and you're like, and then it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. The last 10 minutes were worthless because I didn't even understand what you're talking about in the first part. So you see, it just gets worse. And we see this, and this is like usually a statement when it comes to politics. The cover up is worse than the lie. If you just say, you're right, I had an affair, or I misappropriated funds, I filled out the form incorrectly and I didn't think that was an expense or something like that. And then they're like, okay, let's just move on. It's almost always that way. It's the lie that's what gets you all messed up. In not admitting to someone you don't understand what they're saying, it's not really a lie, but it's an admission of the truth. So I guess that's a lie, sort of like a white lie, I think.
It is like, it's like sweeping things under the rug, like trying to cover up. And then what that creates is like this really weird tension. Like it's so awkward because they see what you're doing and you see what you're doing, but you're not coming out and saying it. And most people are going to be too polite. They don't have the courage to just be like, hey, um, I don't mean to make you feel at ease. And so here's the weird thing is I noticed this in the call with you and Carlos, that very short role play. When was it? It was on,
Um, Monday.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a point where you took the conversation and you said, okay, look, I don't want to pay your prices at this rate, but why don't we give this a try? And then if I feel like it's going well, then I'll pay you the full price you're asking, like the price increase. And I was like, that right there, a client would probably never do that, right? Like you were, what is it? You're sort of changing the conversation to suit your needs. You were taking the driver's seat at that point. And that's something most clients will never do, like never. They may propose it, but most clients are going to just say, yeah, this is a huge price increase, but they won't even be willing to tell you that. So they'll just say, I have to go think about it. And then you'll never hear from them again. Or maybe in a follow-up email. So follow-up email is maybe the best you'll get. So it's a weird thing, right? So the concept of feeling awkward, like I keep thinking about this, is when both people in the conversation see something is happening and yet no one comes out and just says it. So the tension just keeps building and then the weird vibes start happening. So quickest way to dispel the weird vibes is to just come out and say it, admit what you did or admit what happened, and then you're good. So even let's say it is that awkward scenario where I thought I understood what you said, but then 10 minutes later I realized, oh shoot, I had it all wrong. It's not too late to recover. I can say, okay, I gotta admit something. I thought you meant this when you said in the industry, and now I'm realizing I was off. So thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. So just be honest.
Joel, do you have a moment when you were in a sales call when things were on the line and that happened to you?
When I was the one who was being awkward.
When there was an awkward moment and you had to like take the pressure off and you just had to say something, or
Mm.
you didn't say it when you should have?
Didn't say it when I should have. I'm like, hello, 3 years ago. That was like all my sales calls. So 3 years ago, that pause people take when you tell them the price, or even 5 years ago, the pause. What I would do was I would automatically discount myself. My mind was spinning a story and projecting that this is what their pause meant, when in reality, maybe they were just thinking about it. Maybe they were just taking in the information. But let's say, now 3 years ago, they would clearly feel uncomfortable about something. I don't know what, but my mind was jumping to price already. And instead of just saying, hey, it seems like you are experiencing something, you're feeling something about the price, or you're hesitating here. What's happening? I didn't have the knowledge to do that. So there were so many cues, like physical cues, that I was missing. You can see it if you have the privilege of video. You can see when someone starts being like, these sorts of facial expressions. Maybe they were very smiley and then they become very serious suddenly. Like that's also like a turn, right? A shift in the energy. I just blew right past those, like most of those. And then I'll tell you this, this is super embarrassing. People would sign up for me, but because of the imposter syndrome I was feeling, I would take more than a week to send them the invoice and the contract. I would send it to them with no explanation. I wouldn't even say, hey, I know it's been a week. I'm so sorry. Like I promise you this is not how I do business. So this ability to dispel the weird vibes, the tension, to offer some sort of explanation, like this is really key. And it doesn't have to be just in a live conversation.
I'll admit something super embarrassing. Just gonna go out and say it myself. The very first time I taught a class at Otis, I'm like a year into teaching, so I'm really kind of on shaky ground. Maybe not even a year into it. And what fueled my imposter syndrome was because I'm teaching something that no one has taught me. So if I taught graphic design principles, I can just go back and look at the catalog of ways teachers taught and the assignments they gave. I'll just model after that. But I'm teaching motion design, which I kind of just learned on the job, so to speak. And so a young woman, I think her name is Ariana, and she's like I want to say Argentinian or something like that. And we were looking at storyboards, and she had said, Chris, don't you think that idea is too cathartic? I've heard the word cathartic used before, but I'm like, I didn't know what it meant. And here's my student asking me a question like I should know the answer to. And so I do the idiot thing kind of in my rookie year one of teaching. And I'm like, why do you think it's too cathartic? There were crosses and God rays and all this religious metaphor in there. And she was explaining it. I deduced the meaning of the word cathartic after she explained it. And now I feel trapped because I'm like, I don't think so. And then now after she explains it, I have to double down on my kind of idiotness or idiocracy. And I'm like, yeah, I think it's all right. It's just like if anybody was watching this, if Jule Kim was there, the Jule Kim from 2024 were there, she's like, he's like skating on ice right now. This guy's fully just BSing the whole time. And you know what the worst part is? I just felt like I was just being a traitor to myself and that everybody in the room knew I didn't know what I was talking about. And then I made a vow to myself, never do that again. With clients, with students, if I don't know what I'm talking about or they're asking, I'll just say, yeah, I don't know what that is. What, tell me, I've heard the word before, but what is the meaning of the word? I'll just ask now. Now, I'm not perfect, everybody. I'm not saying I'll always do that, but I strive to do that. And that was a lesson I learned 20 plus years ago. And I hold that with me. It's like when somebody says something you don't understand, be brave enough to ask. It'll solve you, or it'll save you from making a lot of mistakes, dumb mistakes, unnecessary mistakes. All right. Jule, when do we get to the part where we get to play with people?
Okay, in 5 minutes,
Okay.
let me go over this one last point because it's part of the scorecard, but it does tie into everything we've been saying. If you have not already looked at this, scroll to the very last slide in the scorecard and just look it over really quick, but it's the specific words or phrasing. So in Chris's literal example here, when the person said cathartic, it's not a word that gets used all the time. When your person you're talking to describes feelings, you should always pay attention to that. If they literally toss out like an emotion type of word, you should write that down. If they're using specific descriptors or labels for things, Write that down. One of the key things I see designers or creatives doing constantly, also people in academia, is they will hear someone say something and then they will auto adjust to their language. Don't do that. Okay, do not change my word for your word because you may think they mean the same thing, but that's not necessarily true on the other person's side. Unusual phrases, like I had a role play several weeks ago or a month ago where I said, oh, shizzles. You don't hear that all the time. If you hear the person make an exclamation or some sort of unusual comment like that, that should cue you in something is happening for that person. And then the suitcase words. I think you said it's from Blair Ends. Suitcase words in particular can be tricky. If I say that's strange, it's very easy for most people to say, yeah, I know that's strange. But do you know why I think that's strange? You don't, not unless you ask me a question. And so one of the points that we covered in our last LinkedIn audio event is that there are many ways to get to an island. And just because you arrived at the same island does not mean you took the same route to get there. And sometimes you're not even on the same island at all. So ask those questions. One of the key indicators of a suitcase word is if you will feel dumb asking the question about that word. What does that mean? So if, Chris, if you were to say, well, that's a little bit weird, most people will just gloss over that and be like, yeah, that was weird. I would be the person asking the dumb question. I'm not sure, like, what was weird about it? And then you would tell me. What I've learned about you is that probably 50% of the time, what I thought was weird about it does not match what you think is weird about it. You offer surprising insights. And that's even after knowing you for a couple of years. So imagine how much harder it would be to match up on the same level with somebody you just met. Okay, so just notice the specific words they're asking and then ask yourself, do you know what these words mean? Chances are you don't. So that's it. Shall we get into role play?
Let's do it.
All right.
Who do I need
Uh,
to bring up?
we have, by the way, we have some questions here. Do you want to answer them now? Before,
Sure. I think you should run the call the way you think best, and I will do my best to support you.
alrighty. I know we have some people who've been waiting for a while. So anonymous attendee says, uh, how I mentioned, I see you're uncomfortable can be risky. So what's a neutral way to respond to a pause or a hesitation? Do you want to take this?
How to respond to a pause or hesitation. Well, I shared earlier how I would have responded. I'd be curious to see if you have a different take on this because I'm afraid I'm going to say the same thing or similar thing.
Mm. I'm always a fan of offering the observation. So just saying what is happening instead of putting a label.
Hmm.
So I see you're uncomfortable. The uncomfortableness is the label. And I would just say, I noticed you paused there. Can I ask what's going on? That's how I generally handle this.
Like a pro. I notice is a great phrase to use. I notice something, whatever it is you notice, versus jumping to the conclusion of what you noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful.
Okay.
Well done.
Gledsley asks, how can someone practice active listening in a sales call environment if they don't have enough leads to practice?
Good question. You don't have to practice on a sales call. You can practice in every dialogue that you have. But here's the beautiful thing about the LinkedIn lives that I've been doing with my friend Jule, also with Carlos and soon to be Annalie, is you have to be brave enough to raise your hand and you can get practice. And this is a perfect segue for me to do a little bit of an announcement here, Jule. I have a little business to do. Tomorrow, I don't know what time, but we're doing a Future Pro tour. I'm going to show you what it's like to be part of the Future Pro community. It's the place and space that I've created that I've always wished I had when I was starting out, so that I can have these kinds of conversations and be able to practice and learn from people a little bit ahead of me, a little bit behind me. I think that's the beauty of this group that we've assembled, that no matter where you are, there's a good chance that there's someone ahead of you and good chance someone's behind you. Even if you're just starting out, we have people who are 16 years old in there, and I'm like, this is crazy that you're here. and we can learn from each other. You can help someone and you can get help from someone. That's happening tomorrow. So on the event here, if you want to, just type in the word pro. Not here in the webinar chat, but in the event on LinkedIn, and I'll make sure to send you the link. And if my friend Carrie's here, she'll drop the link here. I'll try and find it right now. Okay, Joel, what's the next question?
I'm sorry, did I miss it? Did you answer the question
Oh,
about?
sorry. I'm like ready to race and go find the link. My squirrel brain has gone there. Oh, Andres has got that for me. Okay, sorry. What was the question again?
The question, how can someone practice active listening in a sales call if they don't have enough leads?
Oh, I thought I did answer it. You'll practice in your interpersonal relationships with your partner, with your children, with your parent, with your sibling. You'll practice on role plays. You'll do it anywhere and everywhere you can. And it's wonderful. I actually made a habit of this because, as some of you know, I'm painfully shy and socially awkward. Those are awesome traits to have as I'm trying to build a thought leadership. So one thing that I did, and I started doing many years ago, probably 10 years now, was I would just strike up conversations with strangers who I knew they had to talk to me. One such person is like when my family and I, we go on vacation, we sit down at a table, we're being served. I'll just find a way to have a conversation with our server. I'll say, "Oh, I noticed you have an accent. Where are you from?" And then they just tell you stories and you can just listen.
Hmm. Okay, I'll just add one small thing here. If you do role plays with other people, make sure it's real. Not real as in you have to get the sale, but make sure that you are being who you really are, that that other person is being who they really are. The worst is when someone pretends to be someone and they start tossing out things that aren't real, like they're not true. And then the conversation takes some crazy turns. Like you've seen this, right? Like you've done role plays with people pretending things. What did you say?
I said that no real person would say these things because you're confused as to who you are. Let's
Mhm.
just face it, most of us are not character actors or method actors, and we can't really do a great job of pretending to be someone else. So we bring in lots of things, like we might bring in our student self, our professional self, something we saw on TV, and it's not a real person, and so you're responding to something that you would never get in real life.
Okay, perfect. And then we have two more questions. Let's just address one and then we'll address the other, maybe in the role play itself. So the third question is what to say when the client questions why you're recording the sales call.
Oh, okay. There's a couple different things. You know now that Zoom almost by default starts recording. And so people have become really used to that. And you can just say, "Do you mind if I record this?" I use it to make sure I don't miss something later on, and it helps me to review our conversation. If you give people a reason as to why you're doing what you're doing, it makes it go down a lot easier versus it's just going to be broadcasted on YouTube, or are you going to spill trade secrets? Those are the kind of things. And you could reassure them that no one else outside of you or your team members will ever see this.
Yes. So give a reason, but also make sure you give them the choice. Nothing annoys people more than being trapped into the call and you never even address it. They can see it's recording, so then you create one of those awkward moments I mentioned earlier, right? You both see something, and then the fact that you're not addressing it. So address the fact that it's recorded and give them the choice. Some people will say no, even if you say it's just for my private use only, so that I can review my notes. This will never go out into the public in any way. They still won't like that, so give them the choice. All right. So Alejo, I believe, is ready.
Okay, let me bring Leo up. There he is, allowed to talk. Leo, I believe I've added you. You are now permitted to talk.
Hello, guys. Can you hear me well?
Yes, maybe I need to promote you to panelist so we can see you as well. Should we do that? Are you camera ready?
I am camera ready. Yes.
Let me do that. Promote to panelist, which is what you're doing right now. Okay. Kamal, I see your hands up. We will address you when we can. There he is. Alejo.
Okay. Hey,
How you
guys.
doing, buddy? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course. Okay, Joel, what are we doing with Alejo?
All right. If you're up for it, Chris, I would like you to enter the conversation or start the conversation by sharing something with Alejo. It can be sales related or it can just be about anything that happened recently. Alejo, your job is to ask yourself 3 questions. Actually, I'm not going to give you the questions. Let's just see how you are default with your listening skills. So Chris will share something. Chris, if you can share something for at least a minute, so give him enough details to latch onto.
Okay, I'll try. This is difficult for me just to go for a minute without interaction here.
Can
Hey,
I?
so Alejo, I notice you've been really busy. I'm excited for you. I've seen you attend many events, and I look forward to hanging out with you at the Ford event. And I notice every time you go to an event, you're posting a lot more content. You're doing a lot of sketch notes, and you're doing also pictures and videos with folks that you hang out with. One of which is our mutual friend, Mexifunk. I'm spacing on the dude's name right now, but I should know it. I'm curious if there was an intentional strategy on your part as to why you're doing this so much, and if you're seeing positive ROI for yourself as someone who's trying to get more work and doing visual notes.
Great. Well, thanks for noticing all that, Chris. I've been very intentional on doing those things. Um, I'm just curious about why you're asking this question. Just like catching up, or is there something that I could be of value with this information?
Well, I'm mostly curious. I've we've had multiple conversations together. I think your visibility is going to ultimately improve your marketability. And I'm just kind of excited to see how you progress in your journey as a professional. And I just wanted to know more about what you're trying to do.
Chris, it definitely. I've taken some of the advice that you have given me and apply it. It sounds like you want to see if what you're advising me is working. Am I assuming correctly?
No, not necessarily, because I don't
Okay.
remember what I advised you to do. I'm just, okay, look, here it is. I know most people think I'm just a cold-hearted bastard, and sometimes I can be, but I actually genuinely do care about people making progress in their life, that they're maybe not 1,000 steps closer to their goal, but they're a few steps forward. And I'm curious as to what's triggered this activity, what is it doing for you, and just kind of more of a check-in call with you more than anything else.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, definitely thanks for checking in, Chris. And yeah, it has helped a lot being intentional and all these things. Excuse me. I've seen some progress, as you mentioned, the ROI on things. It has translated in some people calling me. I've definitely had more sales calls than the first time we interacted. So I thank you in many ways for that. Um, yeah, I don't know where to go from here. I
Okay.
was gonna ask a question. I was gonna ask a question before he started, but he just got started. So,
Okay.
uh,
Okay, yes, let's pause. What was the
yeah.
question you're going to ask?
Well, the question I wanted to ask was if, because I had this since the beginning, I often encounter that people start talking and then I have a question while they're talking, and I don't know if I should interrupt right away to clarify or just let them, you know, spread it out and then just kind of go back and okay, let's match the dots. So I guess my question is like how advisable it is to interrupt for clarifying or just let it all go and hoping it will clarify at the end. Because at the beginning I had that like situation. I don't know where he was going, where if this was a sales call or a coaching call or just a friend call, but
Okay,
I just let it go.
all right. Can we put a pin in that question and we answer this
Yeah.
later?
Yeah.
The reason is we have certain questions, and I wasn't expecting you guys to actually have a conversation. So this is my bad for not setting the parameters clearly enough in the beginning. So when we do this again, and we'll try like a round 2 here, Chris, or I can do this myself. I just want you to share a story about something that's happened for you, something you want to talk about. That's true.
Mm.
Okay. But the same questions that we're going to walk you through here, and this is also for everybody, will still apply to this conversation. All right. So I'm going to take you through the questions and then we'll do this again, Chris, if you're up for it for round 2 with him. Okay. Number 1, Alejo, what did you hear?
I heard that he mentioned many things that he had noticed about myself and my presence online. I heard that he was curious about my progress and how these things are translating. And um, yeah, that's the main things that I heard.
Chris, how close was he?
Well, there's a lot there that we're not talking about. There's a lot. So if that's your summary of it, I think that's 10% or 15% of the
Okay.
conversation, not 85%.
Okay.
I will say this. Am I allowed to critique or make any observations here, Jule? Are we at that place?
Yes.
I think Jule said, and maybe we got lost in the instruction, try to ask 3 questions, and I think you only got to 2. And one of them was assumptive question, like, oh, are you looking for this or that? And it's like, no, that's not what I'm looking for at all.
No, I didn't ask him to ask any questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is interesting because you played out like a conversation. I think there were 2 or 3 back and forths. But in this particular part, we're not going to score his responses. We're just checking whether his responses indicate how well he was listening.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So by the nature of what I was doing, making it very personal to him, he felt compelled to talk to me, and I derailed your exercise a little bit. No?
No, it was good because I think what Alejo could have practiced was dispelling the awkwardness because he wasn't sure where this was going. So, like everything we have just been saying is, okay, well, thanks so much, Chris, right? I'm honored that you have taken such an interest in what I've been doing. And then just asking either one of us, like, okay, am I supposed to be the seller or are we just having a friend conversation? Right? Dispel that awkwardness. Get clear on why you're here and what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But let's go back to what did you hear? Can you list for me every single thing to the best of your abilities? We're not expecting perfection. What do you remember Chris saying to you?
What I remember Chris saying to me was that he mentioned that he had seen me very busy, that every time that I attend events, I take a lot of photos and I do a lot of sketch notes, that he's curious about the ROI that I'm getting from that. um, he mentioned about us meeting in an event coming up in a few weeks, and our mutual friend Orlando, that's his name. I also sometimes also forget his name, um, and yeah, just mention kind of. No, I'm not gonna put words in his mouth. He mentioned something, but it's a little bit blurry after that. I think at that point I was like, I was trying to understand where the conversation was going. That's what I asked. Um, what was the purpose?
Okay. Chris,
Yes.
how close was he?
He's much better now. I think he's getting to 65%, maybe 70%. I think he's missing some of the emotion behind some of the words because I was really excited and looking forward to seeing you at the Forward event. I'm excited for you as a human being and your path. I wanted to know your intentionality and your plan, how things were working out. Uh, I think that there was some kind of like the subtext that he was missing there. I think he got a lot of the data points now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that brings
Yeah.
me up. Okay. That brings me to my next 2 questions. So number 2 is what does this person mean? Like essentially, what's the main point of their communication? What are they trying to communicate to you? So if I were to ask you that question, Alejo, what would you say?
My first response or my first thought about that is like, this person is interested in my progress or excited, to use his word, in my development. Yeah, I think that's the main thing that I caught from that.
How close is he, Chris?
He's pretty close, I think. I'll say it like this. I think the question is based on all the garbage I was saying, what is your main takeaway from what it is I was saying? And I'll tell you. I noticed you're doing a bunch of things. I'm excited for you. I'm curious what your plan is and how things are working out for you.
Mhm.
That's the general essence of what it is I was saying.
Okay.
Right? I noticed you're doing lots of things. I'm excited for you. I just want to know what your plan and if things are working out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Good, because that was what I
Yeah.
wanted to say. You
No,
can't
no,
tell
that,
me
that
it
makes
doesn't make
sense.
sense.
I mean,
That's literally what I
I
was
was trying to
doing.
use less words because
Yeah.
all that means in essence you were
Mm,
interested in and care for me, and excited for me. So
yeah.
so maybe take away this, like, should I be more what's the word? Uh Nitty gritty is the only thing, like more um I'm forgetting the word. And for all those of you who are putting non-native speakers, this happens to me too. So I'm glad I put myself on the spot. Um, a little bit more concrete, maybe, not so much like rough idea abstract, and try to, yeah, see you nodding. Okay.
Yeah. So remember, so look at the scorecard, right? The specific words or phrases they're using.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want you to repeat everything like a parrot. That's not the
Right.
goal. But there does need to be some level of you knowing which pieces to pull out of the conversation. I don't expect you to do that totally today, right? So today is not so much about the quality of your response. We'll get into that more on Sunday. Today is just how much are you actually picking up on what he's sharing with you
Yep.
or what anyone is sharing with you. So the last question is, what is Chris experiencing? When he was talking to you, what was he experiencing? What was he feeling?
Well, excitement. He definitely was happy. Uh,
How would you
and
describe his expression right now?
right now, well,
Mhm.
right now,
You can't hide, Chris.
yeah, right now he's happy. He's he's uh he's now thinkative. I don't know if that's a word.
And now he looks like he's evaluating you.
Yeah, suspecting. Uh,
All right.
yeah,
How much of his expression did you pick up when he was talking to you?
I got it. Yeah, I could feel that he was excited. Well, to be honest, there was part excitement, part maybe I don't know if that's appropriate, maybe, but like kind of nervous because the prompt initially was a little bit unclear. So he kind of went for it, and in part of the improvising is kind of try to make it form on the go. So I think he was a little bit nervous, but it showed up more as excitement when he started mentioning uh, the things that he was looking forward to. Um, am I onto something, Chris?
Am I allowed to answer, Joel?
Yes.
I'm not nervous. I'm
No.
not nervous at all. I know it's hard for people to understand this, but I'm genuinely excited for you. And I'll give you some context, okay? Usually when I tell people to do things, they don't do anything at all.
Mm,
And then you and I have had a couple of conversations on Instagram, and then I see you doing things, and that really excites me. And I'm genuinely concerned in a positive way. And for me, if I were to summarize what I just said to you, which is I observe things, I'm excited for you, I'm curious if it's working out for you in your plan, which is it's a check-in, which I'm genuinely I care about you, man.
thank you.
I know no one thinks that I care about any of you, but I really do. And it's like inside this Vulcan brain and body is there's a tiny little beating heart, and I do care about you. And I like to see that live long and prosper. And I just want to see you do well. So I'm looking in my mind, the subtext to all this is I wonder if there's anything else I can help you with. So I'm just checking in on you.
Mm,
And this is interesting because I think at some point I think you were like, am I supposed to sell you something?
wasn't
That
sure.
that
Yeah.
that threw me off, you know? It's like, no, I'm just checking in because I want to
Yeah.
be a service to you. I don't
Mm,
want to be sold anything,
mm,
right? So I think that part of our brain is so present
yeah.
in our mind, and that it's like anytime we think there's an opportunity, we're like, do you need help with some sketch notes? Do you know what I mean? And that's not necessary. That's all.
That's great. And I appreciate you saying that, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to just quickly mention one of the comments I'm seeing here, one from Austin, who says, "Ooh, this is tough. Like when you're asking questions about intention and meaning, we
Mm,
realize how hard this is. Layer one is just what the hell are the words? Layer two is like, what is the meaning behind all of this? And there's lots of clues being dropped. We have to be more attuned to picking them up, is the thing.
Oh, can I? So one thing that also threw me off is like, this is an exercise in listening. So after he checks in, I feel compelled to just start sharing, but then it wouldn't be about listening that much. And I would just start telling him everything. So I wasn't sure if I, in the role play, if that was something that I should have done. So just mentioning that also kind of threw me off a little bit.
Well, there's no should here. Okay, one, I think there are two things that you're mentioning. Like, we'll just lay aside the it was unclear, like how we were structuring this, but I think it was still a good learning opportunity for
Yeah.
everyone. Chris came at you with a question to begin with, which is why you're like, oh, am I like, how am I supposed to do this?
Yeah.
Okay. But two is, I think there's something in your response that indicates that you feel the need to like respond immediately. And so
Mm.
this is one of the things that we must all learn is for listening to just dance with silence. Like make sure the other person is done speaking. With video, it's a lot easier to tell because you can see. You can see, you usually will see visual cues. So here's one of the easy visual cues. When someone is talking, and let's say they're talking for more than a minute, like a couple of minutes even, as they're narrating or recounting a story, they're telling you something they experienced, they'll tend to look around. They'll look at you, but then they'll look
Mm.
around. And that's because one of the key things our eyeballs do is we look to, I believe, the left when we're recalling something. Okay. When they are done speaking, the eyeballs will usually return to you and then they'll wait for you to speak, right? We all know this generally. When we're in person conversations, we can see that. But if you're one of the people who tends to speak over people before they're quite done speaking, you should learn the art of letting the silence ride a little bit. Okay. So just a couple of notes. I think overall you did well. If you are taking notes, and I would strongly recommend everybody take notes, when you are listening to someone in everyday conversations, you may not be able to do this all the time, but let's say after this call, you decide to pair up with someone from this call or just a friend, and you take turns sharing a story, take notes, right? What did you hear? Are you getting the basic facts correct, right? Go through my scorecard. Number two, what does this person mean? And number three, what is the person experiencing? The experience part, the feeling part, a lot of it will come from their facial expression, the visual, the physical cues. You probably didn't take any note. If I were to ask you, at what point did his energy really shift? When did Chris do like a big smile? You won't be able to tell me because you weren't noting that. So we take in all this information subconsciously. But if you want to actually be able to do something with this information, then you must start taking a closer look, a more precise look at the data coming in. Do you have any questions?
Don't have questions at the moment. I don't know if there's gonna be a round two, if there's somebody in the line.
Chris,
I would love to be able to apply this again, if
I
that's
would
fine.
like to do a round two, but I don't know, Chris, when's your hard stop here for today?
Oh, good question. My goodness. I've spaced out of my own calendar. Thanks for looking out for me, Jule. I have until 11:45 and I have another podcast at 12.
Okay, perfect. So we have time to do a round two and we have our next person queued up too. So Austin, just so you know, you're coming up next. So get ready.
Awesome.
All right. So Chris, do you want me to share a story or do you want to share a story for him to practice listening?
I think maybe you should share the story so I can kind of watch now.
All right. Before we get into the next one though, there is there is a good question here that I think now would be timely. What to do when the client has a serious face all the time? I feel like they are avoiding to be read by their face. So they're trying not to be read.
Hmm.
Poker face.
Mhm.
That's a question.
Mhm.
I have the benefit of not actually seeing people for the most of my sales calls. So it doesn't bother me that the poker face is there or not. I'll give you a couple of theories and I'll try my best to work through how I might answer this question. I think people hold things close to their chest because they're afraid that by revealing anything, you, the salesperson, will take advantage of them. So even though they're really excited about something that you have to say, they won't express that because by showing their enthusiasm, they think in their mind, a sophisticated salesperson is going to take advantage of them and charge them even more. They also don't want to send false positives to you. Some people are very naturally smiley, positive, happy, and they don't want to accidentally send you signals to say like, I'm doing the deal with you. So that's why they have the poker face. And it's totally okay. You don't need to read their face. You can just ask them whatever it is that you're thinking, and that will usually work around this. Using that phrase, everybody should write in a notebook, I noticed whatever. I noticed the tone had changed. I noticed the long pause. Tell me what that's about. Can you tell me if there's anything behind that? And you can just literally ask them, how does this feel to you? Like when you float the price. This is a classic one, okay? And this happens to me on both sides. Let's just say, Alejo, you're going to do some sketch notes for me or something like that. And you say it's going to be $35,000. Here's what's happening in my mind. I don't want you to think I'm cheap. But that's so far out of the ballpark of what I can afford. And we are just like two ships in the, crossing in the night. We don't even see each other. Now I don't know how to respond. So I'm thinking, we're so far off, I think I'm wasting your time. And I'm trying to be a good client here. Some other people are like, oh, you're smoking crack right now. There's no way I would pay that much. They would kind of insult you and feel insulted by you trying to float such a high price. So in an instance like this, I might respond like, okay, that's a lot of money, Alejo. I don't know if it's a good fit for me. I might say that, but behind all that is all these other things I'm feeling and experiencing. And so then you would probably have to ask me a question at that point. And I can prove this to you at some point if there's time. We can turn off everybody's video camera and we can just talk, and I'll tell you exactly what you're thinking and feeling or meaning because I'll ask you. I won't rely on assumptions or me projecting what it is that I think is happening. Jule, how would you handle that?
Pretty similarly. I mean, all you can ever go off of is your observations, right? Like what you're seeing is happening. So I generally try to stay out of the uh, uh what do you call it? Like the pothole. I try not to fall down the hole of labeling other people. And if they're not giving me facial expressions, then I work with the information I have. Sorry, there's a comment that Rose made in the chat that she said, I prefer not seeing people as it's more distracting for me to try and interpret their facial expressions. I have my thoughts here. So depending on the nature of your work, for instance, because I'm a coach, the relationship I have with my clients is much more close and intimate than most service providers would have, right? It's almost like a therapist. Everybody wants to meet with me either in person or they, at a bare minimum, want to see video. So this may not be your challenge, but I would say just be careful that you're not engineering everything to your preference. Because if someone wants to see your face, right, they want to do a vibe check. That's usually what they're asking that for. They want to see who you are. They want to feel your energy. They can get some of that on a phone call, but these days it's almost the expected norm to have video, like a Zoom call. Okay, we ready for round 2 here? Just a reminder, if you have questions, put them into the question box and then we'll try to get to them. Okay. For this round, I actually do like what happened with you and Chris, where you responded twice. So that's how we'll do it. I'll share an initial story. You'll make whatever response you feel is appropriate. There is no sale to be had, okay? So for everybody we do this with today, and well, at least just for today, there's no sale. So just practice listening. The same 3 questions I gave you earlier. What did you hear? What does the person mean? What is the person experiencing? And if you want to pull up the scorecard and just kind of flick through that as a reminder, also helpful. All right, you ready?
Let's go.
Okay. I put out my first video on Instagram in quite a while. So I'm not super consistent on Instagram lately. Uh, it was on an interesting topic. I was talking about how there's one phrase that people will tend to throw around that tends to piss people off. Not everybody, but it tends to piss people off if you're not close with them. What I noticed that was very interesting on TikTok versus Instagram, I posted the same video. On TikTok, so many comments were, God, thank you for explaining this. I always felt like this, but I didn't know why. And yet on Instagram, the comments were, I'm not like this. I don't take it that way. And I found that really annoying slash interesting. So interesting because the quality of the comments were so drastically like different from each other, TikTok versus Instagram. But Instagram, I'm definitely getting way more comments of people saying, yeah, I'm not like that. And then one person, his response, I don't know if he realized this, but it was coming off very much like you're wrong. Like that's a little bit how it felt, like you're wrong. I never take it like this. And he was insisting that it's a positive phrase. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like I'm just telling you from a lot of people I've heard that they have a major problem with hearing this phrase from people they're not close with. He we continue to converse, okay, let's say. That's my nice way of saying that. And then finally we end the conversation, but I've noticed a trend in the comments. The other trend is either they're saying, I don't take it like that, I don't agree, or they're saying, well, there's something wrong with the other person for taking it like that. And I was like, wow, that's kind of judgy. So there you go.
Yeah. Okay. So do I respond to
Yeah,
that or
just respond like it's a
continue
normal.
the conversation like a conversation? Okay. Conversation. Okay. Well, first of all, what you mentioned of interesting slash annoying, um, I can definitely see that. It's interesting that it moves in two directions in two different platforms for that. Um, I also noticed that you mentioned that this was like the first video that you posted in a while. So I can see that you have a lot of, well, I noticed that you have like a lot of emotions towards it, um, because it, I don't know. Um,
I'm gonna pause you right
yeah,
here. I
I'm
feel
not
like
asking a question. Yeah.
no, you don't have to ask a question,
Okay.
but I'm saying if you and I were friends, I don't think this is how you would be responding.
Okay.
How would you actually respond in a normal conversation?
Okay. So what I'll say is, man, that's weird to start with, because I mean, I know that social media platforms interact differently, but to be one platform that is so positive and the other one so confrontative, I'm curious about what phrase was it? Like, do you mind sharing it with me? Because don't want to use it on Instagram if that's the case. Um, definitely. What was it? Or what was the phrase?
Yeah, the phrase is, I'm proud of you.
Really?
You look surprised.
Yeah. Like, why would people take that as a negative?
Well, that's kind of what the post is about, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Um, is this a so like I know you post stuff about coaching generally. Was it something that was related to like coaching in general, like you as a coach saying I'm proud of? Because I'm trying to understand why the reaction could have happened,
Which reaction?
like the negative reaction. So what I'm saying is like if the phrase is I'm proud of, and you as a coach are saying like
No,
coming,
just
ah,
I'm proud of you. Like if I were to say to you, like,
okay,
oh, I'm proud of you.
okay,
You've taken a lot of action based on what Chris is saying. I've seen
yeah.
your work, your sketch notes are amazing. I'm proud of you. How does that land?
I mean that lands okay to me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Because I've
that
heard that in the context of somebody who cares about me, you know,
mhm.
it doesn't sound patronizing. I feel like
Mm,
that's maybe what people might have heard.
okay. Yeah, that's fair. So let's end it there. What did you hear?
I heard that you have been inconsistent with content and you posted something for the first time recently, that you posted it on, that it was a phrase on an interesting topic that you posted on TikTok and on Instagram. And then you said annoying slash interesting results, because on TikTok people were very supportive and yes, and on Instagram there was some conversation with a specific person actually, that, and you said you continued to converse, to put it a nice way, which just sounds like you were not just conversing. um, um, because they felt that that phrase was wrong. And yeah, that's pretty much what I got.
Okay. Chris, what about you? How close do you think he was here?
I think he got. I think he got quite a bit of it. I think this time he did a better job of hooking into some of the emotions that you're feeling, because it changed quite a bit. There like I couldn't totally map it out on a graph, but I felt like there was this thing about I hadn't posted in a while, so there was like the kind of self-judgment there at the beginning. You
Mhm.
know, I've been inconsistent in the way that you're like, how should I put it? Converse, and there was kind of a smile. So I think you're annoyed but bemused by it. So there was a change in emotion there, and this maybe there was a confused state to like, how come God darn it, same freaking piece of content hits on two platforms and I get totally different reactions, one seemingly overly whelming positive and the other one almost the exact opposite. And some part of you is trying to understand that and dig deeper, like why you want to get into the comments with one of these guys, you know,
Mhm.
and why we have such strong reactions to this phrase.
Yeah. Okay. I would say Alejo, you got the facts of what I said pretty well. Like you were pretty close. I would score you like 85%. Okay. And again, I don't expect you to repeat everything I said like you're some kind of robot recorder.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on to what did I mean? Like what was the main thing I was communicating to you here?
It it seemed to me that you were trying to communicate a sort of confusion slash annoyance with how a piece of content is being taken. That's something that you put out in the wild. Um, it it seemed to me like there was some, yeah, it was like an annoyance with people getting it, like poking it, like not taking it as you meant it in the beginning. Um, yeah, that's what it looked like to me when you were mentioning all that.
Okay. Remember when we reset, I said, I don't think this is how you would be talking to a friend. Do
Yeah,
you remember what's the first thing you said right after that?
how annoying. I
Yeah,
think that's what I said. Yeah, because I was trying to empathize. Like I do that when people tell me things, I immediately try to sync with their emotion and be like, "Oh gosh, like I feel it too." But for some reason, when I started the role play, I was like just focusing on the facts and not so much on the feeling, or like making you feel like I'm getting what you're experiencing, or that I'm on your side, maybe. Um,
perfect. You
yeah,
actually said that's weird. So that was great.
that's weird. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm noticing here is yes. So even you just saying that one little phrase helped me feel seen.
Yeah, you smiled.
Yes. Because like great job.
Yeah.
The the main thing here, if someone is complaining about something, which is essentially what I was doing, they're trying to get it off their chest, right?
Mhm.
They're looking for some level of validation, also slash understanding. There's possibly some sort of energy that I don't really want. Let's say negative energy, even though I didn't say that. that we are trying to dissipate when we share this sort of experience with anyone else. Okay. When you don't share with other people something that is bothering you, it tends to fester. You saying that's weird instantly lightened the load probably by like 50% for me. Okay. And then when I prompted you to just talk to me like a normal friend instead of trying to be so formal about it, your energy dropped into a more natural state, which I really appreciated. There is one thing I noticed that you did. You started labeling the two experiences. So on TikTok, I never said it was a positive experience. You said supportive at one point, which I took a pause and I was like, supportive, did I say that? I don't think I said that. What I said was, I had a lot more people saying, man, I always felt that way, but never knew why. Thank you for, posting about this. Thank you for explaining this. Never heard anybody explain it this way. But
Yeah.
I myself did not label it. So that's where it could be okay to label it. And in this case, I was like, I'll let that pass. Supportive, sure. But for me, it's not so much of is it positive, negative. It's just very interesting when I said interesting / annoying. Interesting that the responses on the two platforms are so drastically different when it's the same video.
Mhm.
When I said annoying, what did I find annoying?
That's a good question. I After you said annoying, you started talking about the person who specifically was like say like being contrarian, I guess it's the word. Um, was that the reason you found it annoying?
Yeah, that would be a question for you to then ask, like, what was so annoying about it? It seems like here's some stuff you've mentioned. So
Mm-hmm.
here's one of the risks you'll run into. Sometimes when you ask a seemingly dumb question, like, what is annoying about this? You may have some people come back at with you, like I said earlier, which is so annoying itself. It's like so passive aggressive,
Yeah.
but you're just trying to understand them. If you want to avoid that as best as possible, what you'll do is just you'll recount one or two of the things they said. So, I remember you said this, but what else did you find annoying about it? So that's how you would sort of build in to maybe avoid the, well, like I said earlier, are you paying attention? You're not even listening to me sort of vibe that some people get. They'll get a little bit judgy here. Okay, perfect. Chris, any comments here?
The comment I want to make is you'll find out, and I'm pretty sure Alejo will affirm this, actively listening is exhausting. And if you map the way that you're focused right now, as opposed to everyday conversation, your brain's probably on overdrive. You probably need to take a nap or something after this. And that's the problem. So in most of our daily interactions, we're barely listening at all. We're making lots of assumptions. We're packaging and compressing these files down to like tiny little things that when we try to look at it again, it's so like filled with artifacts. It's like a low resolution JPEG kind of image, right? And I think that's the difference. So I think that's okay because you don't want to burn all your calories just listening and paying attention to everything in your daily life. But when you're on a sales call, you need to have the ability to access this skill on demand. Now, do you feel kind of tired? Alejo, you've done this twice now.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm kind of tired too, to be honest. And that's why when people get up on stage and they tell me their whole life story and then there's a question in there somewhere, I'm like, oh, I can't keep up with this. Do you know what you're trying to ask? Because I need your help. Because that's what it means. And people don't understand this. So I would say this is a broad statement, but people who are used to talking while other people are talking, they don't find it exhausting at all because they're actually spending almost none of their brain power listening. They're spending all their time either talking or getting ready to respond. I'm waiting for you to be quiet so I can say something. And so, of course, they're not tired. But I would argue that I don't think you're really paying attention.
Mm.
Yeah. So, Jule, my response to you having listened to this, and I'm tired also just trying to listen because thinking maybe you'll test me, was I think I would have just said, God, that freaking sucks. And I would just try to help shift your energy away from the negative, right? And I was like, what is really kind of eating at you here? Because I want to let you dump. I know you're complaining about something and I want to get it all out of you so we don't have to sit here and circle around it for like 3 hours. Like, and then I would probably ask you, is there anything I can do to support you in this moment besides listening? Because most of the times I think guys especially, but some women too, make the mistake of, let me try and solve this for you. Jewel, why do you respond to those comments? And she's like, you're not listening to me right now. I just need to tell people how people suck. You know, why is this person saying you're wrong, Jewel? No one wants to hear that. Like, you're wrong, especially when they're not seeking that. So I would just like, that sucks. Oh my God, freaking internet. What else can you tell me? What's going on here?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I would say I would caution upon wanting to shift the person's energy away too soon. So this is what I term like pulling the cake out of the oven too soon. There is a certain process that we all go through when we're trying to figure out what's happening, especially if it's something we didn't enjoy. There's a level of processing time. What most people will do is they'll try to skip over the processing because they don't like feeling icky and they try to get to the good part. But what happens when you do that is the same sort of encounter will keep happening. I will, theoretically, I would further be triggered by more internet people trying to prove me wrong. There was a comment here by Elise when I said, why was I annoyed? Right? Like, what did I find annoying? Elise wrote, the person was not trying to argue about the subject, they were trying to prove her wrong. I don't know what she meant about not trying to argue, but I would say he was very much trying to argue and he was trying to prove me wrong, right? Like his writing style at least did not demonstrate he wanted to just have an open conversation. But that was most of the comments, like, well, I don't take it that way. I don't know what you're talking about, kind of thing, So that was just like, oh, people. Yeah. All right. I think that's about all we have. There is one other thing I will say here. Chris kind of scooted under everybody's radar. What he was saying is, gosh, that sucks. That is validation. He was telling me it is okay for me to feel that way. That's the same thing you did when you said that's weird, right? You are telling me it's okay to feel that way. Now, the other thing that Chris did as well is he said, he wanted to shift the energy, right? So in order to shift the energy, he must have first noticed what I was doing. So in the back of your mind, hold this question in your mind when you're listening to people. Just ask yourself, what are they doing? Are they complaining? Are they dodging the question? You give them a piece of advice. Are they just looking for all the things wrong with your advice instead of actually listening? Or are they like you, where they take in the advice and they actually go act? So what are they doing? All right. So thank you so much, Aleo. Any questions before we?
Questions? No, excuse me. No, I don't have questions at the moment. Thank you so much, guys, for the opportunity and the coaching, the observations, all that. It's wonderful being able to share and to learn from you guys live. So thanks again. And Chris, see
Right.
you in a few weeks.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Alejo. Chris, a time check with you. Do we have time for one more person, or do you have to really hop off at 10:45?
I could push a little bit here. I know I have a hard at 12, so as long as I
Okay.
get off like with a couple of minutes, to recharge here. So Jewel, there's something that I want to share with you. I'm
Mhm.
glad you pointed out all these little things. When you said this is freaking annoying, interesting, whatever, I'm like 100%. I know what you're talking about. I feel this same way. That's why I'm freaking sucks. And the reason why my energy changes is because I know that we need to get this off our chest, but I also know, like, in this grand scheme of things, freaking, this is just the internet. It does suck. And, I know my personal conversation with you, we laugh we laugh a lot about stupid things so that we can just, you're right. Let's put everything in perspective, everybody. So I'm not telling people to do that. It's just my nature with you, right? We'll laugh about the dumbest things and then we move on.
Yes,
You know?
we do move on, and we're able to move on because it's such a simple thing, right? Validating, just agreeing. It's like, yes, that does suck.
I hate it when that happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll give everybody like a brief teaser into one of the future calls when we talk about questions, right? It's either call 4 or 5, I can't remember. But not every response on your part has to be a question. You notice Chris said, gosh, that sucks. It's not a question, it's just a comment. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring up Austin.
Austin, here we go. Austin, I see him patiently waiting here. More promote to panelists. And before Austin comes up, I just want to remind everybody, if you're curious about the Future Pro Group, we have over 250 people who signed up for the tour that's happening tomorrow. I will show you behind the scenes. I'll show you how to use it. So even for existing Future Pro members that are like, I didn't know this existed, just tune in tomorrow. It's kind of my walkthrough. Okay, there's Austin. What's up, Austin?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
Hey, okay, Chris, do you want to
Yes.
share something or do you want me to share something?
I could share something.
All right, let's
Austin,
go.
I hope I say this in advance. I apologize if I short circuit your brain. All right.
It's already there.
Okay. It's okay.
Let's
You
go.
got this. Use the remaining 4%, push through this. I'm just going to share a story and then I think we're going to do the same thing.
Cool.
I'm really curious about people who aspire to be better public speakers and communicators. And one such person is my friend Carlos, who recently took part in a improvisational course. And I was really curious about like, what is it that you do? To be honest, I'm really chicken-ass when it comes to like doing things like that. So I just wanted to live vicariously through them. And so Raul and Carlos were sharing like, how does this begin? And I thought it was fascinating. They give you a prompt. They'll say something like balcony. And the two of you have to define certain things. Who's the character? What's the situation? I forgot the rest of this, but without getting into exposition, they can just start to respond to each other, right? So Carlos starts and he's thinking of himself on the balcony and he says something like, Dad, you know how I was late before? So that puts Raul in the position that our relationship is you're either my daughter or my son. And then he has to play with that. And he cannot ask like, why were you late? Because that means I have no history. This was fascinating to me because this means that the construct is you're trying to be very real people. And it's not the origin story. It's somewhere kind of in a real situation where you have history together and you can just respond to that. And they used a lot of yes and. And then I asked them like, what makes one of the classes good and versus bad? And it's all about the teacher. They both prefer teachers that stop them, correct them, ask them to make a small adjustment because it opens up the sandbox for the other person to play. Whereas a less or more passive instructor doesn't know what to do with them and just lets them go off the rails and they don't feel like they're really learning.
Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to forget
You don't need
that.
to say
Okay.
anything. I think we wait for Jule to.
Well, yeah. I think I'll
That's it.
respond like prior, just like a sentence or two to show active listening. So, that's super interesting. I've never had any interest in improv because I'm it's fairly introverted overall. But I think that if you, in this context of discussing sales and discussing active listening, that's like the ultimate, I guess, practice to be able to do something on the fly based on people's contexts that just come out of nowhere. So that's based on, sorry, apologies. I was assuming Carlos is taking that course. Maybe not because he wants to be an improv comedian or anything, but he probably wants to sharpen his sales skills and his active listening skills, which is really interesting angle to improving that. It never crossed my mind. So I'm assuming that's maybe why you're interested in it too. If you're going to give it a shot, you'd be really good at it. So there you go. Too nervous, guys. Didn't think I'd be nervous, but I didn't think I'd also be on video with you guys. So it's another layer.
It's okay, hang in there. Joel, what do we do next?
I think let's just pause here because you're running out of time. So Austin, what did you hear Chris share? Just relay the basic facts.
It seemed like Chris was interested in, he heard from Carlos about him taking an improv course. He asked him about why taking it, as well as kind of what teachers were what made a course better than other courses, and Carlos responded about the teachers and instant critique, instant feedback from the teachers could allow them to, just like your guys' calls, make adjustments to in real time versus just writing down notes and practicing later with a friend. Also, he talked about the intricacies of improv and the fact that you have using the like yes and to be able to jump into a situation and throw your other, I guess, the person you're doing improv with into context of I think he mentioned like a child or a spouse, so they with just a sentence out of nowhere with a prompt, so that way he could jump right in and try to it kind of seemed like they were just jumping and going for it, which is pretty interesting. Aside from that, I mean, based on my notes, I think he mentioned to be better public speakers. I missed that. That was one of my earlier notes, but that was kind of the intent of this course. Curious about aspiring to be a public speaker.
Okay, good. Chris, how did he do?
He did okay. I think there was some interpretation of what I did not say. He got a lot of facts correct. I think he missed all the emotions, and potentially we haven't asked him the meaning of what it is yet, but yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to ask the meaning just yet. What did you notice about Chris's energy when he was telling you this?
Yeah, I missed that. Apologies. He was excited and interested. He seemed like it was a like I kind of expressed, it was something he was like almost vetting to see if it was valuable for him to take a course, and maybe asking Carlos what course would he recommend based on the teacher.
Is that true, Chris?
Emotionally, yeah, sorry.
No.
No? Okay.
He said
0%.
something.
Yeah.
He said something.
0%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so on the point of unique phrasing, words that the client said, Chris said, "I'm way too chicken-esque." What does that tell you?
He's an introvert as well, or he doesn't want to go down that road, but maybe he's interested in those who do want to pursue that. Good call. I missed that.
Okay, now even look at the way he said chicken-esque. What does that tell you about Chris and language?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
It's more obvious than you think.
I've never used chicken S in my life, so
Right.
What does it stand for?
afraid, or he's that's not something he's interested in. I don't know. What do you?
What does S literally stand for?
Chicken S.
Okay, are people putting this in the chat?
I'm looking in the chat.
Is this, am I making this too hard?
There we
Okay,
go. Ivy knows.
Oh, chicken shit. Okay, sorry. I've never heard anyone use chicken S. Yeah.
okay.
Okay. Got it.
So the fact that he said S instead of shit, what does that tell you about Chris and his values?
That Chris is professional and tries to keep his language under wraps on whether it's a personal conversation or business conversation. Sure.
Look at him with the halo.
He's a halo. Yes, he's a God-fearing Christian, apparently. I don't know. Whatever you want to call it.
All right. There is one word he used more than once to describe his observation of watching Carlos about the improv thing. He said, I'm curious about people who are aspiring to be public speakers, etc. There's one particular word he used to describe this entire encounter and how he's watching them. What was the word? Anybody?
I didn't catch it.
Anybody know?
Anyone in the chat?
It starts
Phone a
with
friend.
It
Sorry.
starts with an F. F as in fox. Okay. Did anybody catch the word? He said it more than once. No takers. Chris said fascinating. He said fascinating more than once. He's watching how they're going about this journey. So how would you describe Chris's energy? You said interested earlier, but if you look at fascinating, and then you even look at the fact that he's asking them what makes a good course from a bad course, or a good instructor from a bad instructor, what does that tell you about him?
I guess I'm going to give you a longer answer, but
Please don't.
based.
Keep it short, man. 2 sentences.
Okay.
We're running out of time.
Okay, you're right. It seems like Chris is trying to, he doesn't have interest in doing this, but he wants to learn as much as he can from what Carlos has learned from it.
Perfect. Okay, Chris.
Yeah, I said I'm living vicariously through these people. Those are words that you would want to pick up on. Chicken ass, living vicariously, fascinated. And there's a certain manner of speech. Jule's just trying to help you understand how to pick up the clues in which people are dropping. The example is pointless, meaning like it's not relevant to anything that we're doing, but just to learn how to listen and to tune into words. And I'm going to make an assumption here, Austin, but your pattern of speaking and how you say choppy little sentence, like you get a little nervous and you're trying to say too much.
Yeah.
Just take a deep breath and just be present, okay? And
I
there's
think
a
the
real
notes are
reason.
actually hurting me too. Sorry to interrupt, but I think I focused so much on getting those key words, trying to write them down instead of just listening to you. It kind of backfired on me a bit.
I
personally.
understand. I could totally relate to that. So everybody, we've noticed two different things. Alejo changed his personality as soon as Jules like, just react to me like a human. There really shouldn't be any difference between you as a human and you as a salesperson. And we've seen this time and time again when people step up to role play with us. I'm like, wait, do you normally talk like that? I'll give you an example, okay? And I'm just exaggerating a little bit. Hey, Austin, it's so good to see you and talk to you today. And I'm like, let's talk about the problem that you have. And I'm excited about doing this. I'm like, are you like that all the time? Because I would run. I would just run from you.
Yeah.
I just can't. And so why do people feel like they have to become someone else? And do they hate themselves so much that they think by becoming that other person that they're going to get business? In my experience, when you become that other person, I'm just already turned off by you.
Yeah.
Because I want to work with a real human. So what we have to do is remember we need to be ourselves. And if we're out of ourselves, the tool that I use a lot is just say, I'm sorry, I need to hit a quick reset. I don't know why I'm just so nervous. And that usually dissipates. Like what Jule said before, if there's tension, awkwardness, holding it in only makes it worse. It's like the pressure cooker, you just got to release the valve. So to be brave enough to take the risk, like, whew, I'm just a little nervous talking to you. I need to just let you know. And people do this to me all the time.
Yeah, you're so cool.
And everything is chill. And I'll do this. Like if I'm with a celebrity that I've been admiring for like 50 years of my life, whatever, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm in the same room. Got that off my chest. And then it's cool. Otherwise in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe we're in the same room. And I'm going to bounce off the walls. And I'm going to say stupid things at that point. 2 minutes left, Jule.
All right. Just one observation, which Chris barely or very briefly touched upon with you, Austin, is we all go through this. We feel like we have to take all the notes, but then that takes us out of presence and out of listening. So you have to find the right balance of taking notes for you. There's no magic answer here. You just have to do it enough and then find what works for you. You already noticed that taking too many notes was detrimental, and how you weren't listening like you normally would if you were just a friend. The other thing that I'm observing about you is there is this tendency, because of the nerves, which I think most of us fall prey to when we feel nervous, we'll either talk too much or we'll shut down. We stop talking entirely. I believe you to be in the camp of talking too much. So I didn't mean to be rude earlier, but when you said this is going to be a longer answer, and I said, please don't keep it to 2 sentences.
I appreciate that.
Okay. I've heard you on the previous LinkedIn audio when you stepped up and asked the question to Chris and Carlos, and you were saying, how do I I think your question was around how do I basically get this side hustle going when I'm working a 9 to 5? And then you were like, my answer is to go get a better job, or that's what you used to think, right?
Yeah.
So I remember you very clearly. And what really struck me is that your energy was so honest. It was so natural. And then today, the energy you're showing up with is different from the guy I remember back on that call. So maybe
Yeah,
let's do.
this happens on sales calls too. It's not just the Chris Doe being intimidating. I mean, yes, that's a layer of it, but sales calls, it does bring a little more out of me in that front. I don't like it.
Sure. You know, it's something you get used to
Just
within.
practice, maybe.
Yeah. So maybe we'll see you back again on Sunday. We can follow up on the actual response. The other thing I'm also observing about you is a tendency to sort of cut people off before they're done talking. So I would say
Yeah.
just watch out for that. All right. So no shade to you. Not a problem
It's
here.
okay.
Yeah, because we're practicing. Chris laughing.
You're doing it nonstop, Austin. Stop it. Stop it. You're doing it nonstop. Like, here's what you do. I know some people are like this. Just put yourself on mute. You're like, yes, you're right. They won't even hear you. It's very important for the other person to be heard. And you can do it once or twice. I hope you never do, but if you do it 5 times, like, I'm out. Literally in my mind, I'm in an airplane. I don't even need a parachute. I'm jumping. I'm done. So just keep that in mind, okay? My number one pet peeve with my creative directors on a call, if you cut off the client, I'm gonna give you the dagger eyes. I'm like, don't do that again. I will take you away your ability to speak if you do this again, right? Oh, I'm like, you stop it, stop it, stop. I need to hear what they're saying. This is the thing. I think somewhere in our lives, we feel really smart if we can complete someone's sentence. Like, you know how much I love you? Like, no, I hate you. You know my favorite animal, dog? We just do this all the time. So don't do it. Silence is golden. Silence is your friend. And you got this, Austin. I know you got this. Jule doesn't pick random people to talk to. She picks people she believes in. So you know that you have her vote of confidence. And when the client agrees to call you, have a call with you, they are voting also with their time. You have goodwill. You don't need to prove nothing. Just relax and you're good. All right. I have to get out of here, Jule. Okay? I wanted to tell you the reason why improv is so important, and I didn't get to tell you this all, is because Carlos and other people who've done improv say it's one of the best exercises to be grounded. You got to forget who you were and you have to just be in the moment. Like, what are they saying? What does it mean? What are they saying? What does it mean? How do I play with them? How do I be generous and give them something so they can play too? And that's the whole reason why Carlos and Juan are doing improv, to learn how to be more present. With that, I have to bail. Jule, awesome as always. Hopefully next time we're able to do this simulcast, but I believe if you've enjoyed this, you'll come to the next Zoom webinar, and technology be damned, we'll do what we need to do. Okay, everybody?
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. And hopefully I will see most of you on the Pro Tour tomorrow if you're not already a part of the Pro Group. I'm a big believer. I've been in the Pro Group since 2021 and I'm still in it. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you. I'm going to end this now. So goodbye, everybody. See you next time.
Bye, everybody.